United States has imposed sweeping sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies. The European Union has approved its 19th package of restrictions against the aggressor. The issue of confiscating frozen assets in the Russian Federation has finally started to move forward, and the summit in Budapest has been postponed indefinitely and most likely will be cancelled altogether. That's what this week has been like for the aggressor country. What could all this mean for its economy? And what does such a drastic change in U.S. policy mean? Let's figure it out. So, this week Donald Trump announced sanctions against the two largest Russian oil corporations, Rosneft and Lukoil, as well as their subsidiaries. Altogether, these giants account for more than 5% of the world's oil production. And it's these companies that provide up to 40% of the Russian budget's oil revenues. As many economists have vividly noted, for the Kremlin, this isn't just a slap in the face. It's a powerful blow, after which Putin's war machine will have a hard time functioning.
Believe me, these are colossal sanctions. They're very serious. They're aimed at two of their major oil companies. And we hope that these restrictions won't last long. We hope that the war will be stopped. We're considering supplying various types of missiles to Ukraine, but I think they won't be needed. We just want the Russians to turn around and go home.
The Wall Street Journal reports that Trump had 3 options for new sanctions against Russia on his desk, prepared by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. The toughest option was a series of measures targeting Russian industry and high-ranking Kremlin officials. The mildest option involved limited sanctions and warnings. And finally, the middle option, which is the one the President of the United States chose, was a targeted strike against the energy sector of the aggressor country.
Trump's patience ran out when he concluded that Putin was forcing him to play by his rules. At the same time, the U.S. president kept seeing footage of Russian strikes on Ukraine. A few hours after Trump canceled his meeting with Putin in Budapest, Russia struck Ukraine again, this time hitting, among other things, a kindergarten building. According to administration officials, Trump did not directly comment on these strikes, but they irritated him, even though at times he felt he was making progress in his relationship with Putin. From a publication by the Wall Street Journal.
9 months, Donald Trump refrained from taking decisive action, hoping that it would be possible to reach an agreement with Putin. He repeatedly claimed that personal contact could change Moscow's position. But all this time, the Kremlin was simply pretending to negotiate and continued to strike peaceful Ukrainian cities.
An important aspect of the U.S. sanctions was the element of surprise, which for the first time showed that Putin's ability to flatter Trump and delay a ceasefire was limited as long as Russia continued its attacks on Ukraine. The impact of the sanctions on Russia will largely depend on how strictly they are enforced, as well as to what extent companies and countries importing Russian oil fear becoming targets of secondary sanctions, according to a publication by the Washington Post.
The summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, which was scheduled to take place in Budapest, has also been postponed indefinitely. In essence, it has been called off. This is yet another clear sign of the cooling relations between Washington and Moscow. As noted by commentators from the German publication Tagesspiegel, this is actually good news, since a deal struck in the Hungarian capital could have triggered an even larger war. Putin had no intention of making concessions, and he would have seen any step toward compromise as a sign of weakness.
It's good news because the deal Trump had in mind would not have led to a lasting peace. Ukraine was being asked to give up the territories occupied by Russia and, in return, receive no reliable security guarantees. Such a ceasefire would sooner or later lead to a larger war on NATO's eastern flank. Putin wants much more, the restoration of Russia's sphere of influence in Central Europe, just as it was during Soviet times, according to the publication by the Tagesspiegel.
The new U.S. sanctions against Russia will take effect after November 15. But Indian and Chinese companies have already started refusing to buy Russian oil, fearing secondary restrictions and the loss of access to the Western financial system. After all, any deals with Rosneft and Lukoil could lead to asset freezes and a ban on transactions in dollars. Moscow is not only losing its main buyers, but is also taking a new hit to its export logistics. And the shadow fleet that Putin was counting on isn't saving the situation this time.
Russia has a month to prepare before the restrictions take effect. And most likely, it will use this time to adapt to the new situation. Moscow has long found ways to circumvent Western sanctions through opaque trading schemes and its network of shadow fleet vessels. However, the scope of U.S. sanctions is enormous, and for most companies, the risk of being cut off from the broader Western financial system may outweigh the benefits of continuing to trade with Russia. Based on materials from The Guardian.
In addition, this week the European Union approved its 19th package of sanctions against Russia, which has become one of the most extensive in recent times. Starting January 1st, 2027, a ban on the import of Russian liquefied gas will be introduced. The new restrictions also target 117 vessels from the so-called shadow fleet, as well as several Russian banks and companies. For the first time, the sanctions have affected crypto platforms and transactions that the Russian Federation uses to circumvent financial restrictions. And now just imagine how all of this could work together with the measures adopted by the US and the UK.
Until now, the United States had refused to impose sanctions against the main players in the Russian oil export market. And now a serious blow has been dealt to the financing of Russia's military efforts. We also know that right now the Russian economy is suffering greatly and taking huge losses. This is probably the first time such a situation has occurred since the start of the war. That's why I believe that the U.S. sanctions are truly a turning point, and when combined with the restrictions we've recently adopted and the pressure put on a number of other players, it will bear fruit.
Russian media immediately started saying that the EU and US sanctions would end up hurting those who imposed them, not Russia. The deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, wrote that Trump has chosen the path of war and now, supposedly, he is fully aligned with hostile Europe. Even the Kremlin dictator decided to address the press to explain how Russia will live from now on. He called the sanctions an attempt to put pressure on the Russian Federation and said that they would not have a significant impact on the country's economy. Supposedly, they won't have much effect, although some losses are still possible. By the way, here's how American President Donald Trump responded to all these statements.
I am glad he thinks so. That's good. I'll let you know in 6 months. Let's see how these sanctions work.
Indeed, the effects of sanctions aren't seen right away. It's like a slow poison that will gradually kill one industry after another. In addition, the confiscation of frozen Russian assets is turning from a political idea into a real tool of pressure. And at the EU summit in December, such a decision could be made. And now, with the West acting in such a coordinated way for the first time, Russia should be thinking not about how to get around the restrictions, but about how long its economy can even last under this kind of pressure.
Subscribe to The Gaze and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.